Hi, my name is Ryan Wieland. I'm a pastor at New Crossing Church in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and this is a video commentary on the book of Ruth. We're going through the whole book of Ruth. It's meant to accompany our sermon series in the book of Ruth at our church, and this is a video on Ruth 4, 1 through 12. So that's enough dilly-dally. Let's grab our Bibles, a cup of coffee, and jump right in. All right. So up to this point in the book of Ruth, we've seen that Ruth and Naomi both lost their husbands in the country of Moab. Ruth is Naomi's daughter-in-law, and Ruth decided to stay with Naomi as she traveled back to Bethlehem. Naomi and Ruth got back to Bethlehem, and Ruth had to work really hard to provide for Naomi and herself, and got the attention of a man named Boaz, worked in his fields, and then approached him at night on the threshing floor. And there was a very romantic but also redemptive encounter they had at night. And now we pick up the story where Boaz is trying to figure out how to basically propose to Ruth and make Ruth his wife. So we see in Ruth 4:1, now Boaz has gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned and sat down, turned aside and sat down. And so the first thing to notice here is now. And it's just sort of saying this is a transition. It's signaling movement forward in the story. Naomi said in chapter 3 that Boaz would not rest until the matter was settled. And here we are. Boaz didn't rest. This is a narrative momentum. No delays, no ghosting, no let me think about it 3 weeks. No, this is the next day. And then the gate right here, they sat down at the gate. That's where a lot of the important decisions are made. This is the city hall, the public square, all rolled into one. Legal business happened here. Witnesses gather here. If it happens at the gate, it's official. And behold is the next thing you should notice. This is a, hey, pay attention moment. The narrator is saying you really are going to want to pay attention at this moment. And we see that the Redeemer shows up. This is a big word. In Hebrew, it is goel. And it is the Redeemer, the protector, the provider, the person that protects people in case they need it. Oftentimes, widows would be protected and provided for by the Redeemer. There's a direct connection here to Christ. And this Redeemer, the first in line to redeem Naomi and Ruth, comes and meets Boaz at the gate. And interesting how it's translated here into our English, turn aside, friend, or sit down, friend, sit down here. And it sounds really polite in English, but in Hebrew, it's intentionally vague. And it actually kind of means literally Mr. So-and-so or John Doe. The narrator actually doesn't even name this person who is the so-called Redeemer, and names matter in Ruth and in the ancient Near East. And this man is already unnamed and fading in importance. Ruth 2, we read, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. 10 men is overkill unless this is a really important matter. So the fact that there's 10 is a really big deal. And not just 10 men, but 10 elders. This is the leaders of the city. And they sat down to listen in. Then he said to the Redeemer, again, Redeemer showing up here, unnamed man, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. He's not being unclear. He's saying it very clear what's going on. He's not trying to confuse or anything like that. He's saying exactly what's going on, selling the land. And he's wondering what's going to happen next. And he says, so I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here, in the presence of the elders of my people. If you redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. So this is kind of an interesting plot twist. You know, it looks like Boaz is going to be the Redeemer, and he says, hey, if you're going to buy it, buy it. And the idea here is in Hebrew, buy, acquire. He's going to actually get it for himself. We thought Boaz was going to buy it. And now Boaz is saying this person first in line needs to be asked. And he continues to go on, redeem it, if you will not, tell me, because I want to redeem it. A lot of redemption word here showing up, redeem. And then Boaz says, And then the man says, I will redeem it. This is a really, really gasp moment. Like, oh no, we thought Boaz was going to redeem it. And now this man is saying he's going to redeem it. So then we continue on in verse 5. And thankfully, the suspense ends pretty quickly. Then Boaz said, the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in the inheritance. So we see Ruth, the Moabite, being named again here as the Moabite. The narrator just not letting us forget it is the Moabite. Also, Boaz making it really clear about who it is. There's no dishonesty happening here. It's Ruth the Moabite. Then we see that acquire, again, the day you buy the field shows up here. Again, the same word as before. Redemption is costly. You have to buy it. You don't get the land without the responsibility. You actually have to buy it. And then the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name. Perpetuating the name of the dead is the whole point of this. So name is a really important concept here. And it's shame or same in the idea here is that it carries identity. It carries reputation, legacy. This is how Naomi is going to be provided for. This is how Ruth is going to be provided for, and how Elimelech's name is going to continue is through the redemption of Naomi and of Ruth. The Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself. And here's the resolution to that maybe tension we felt. He says, I can't redeem it. Again, redemption, redeem, just showing up all over the place. And he's worried because it might impair his own inheritance. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because this man who's unnamed is worried about delusion, risk, and he walks away. The great irony of this chapter is that the man who is trying to protect his name ends up losing it entirely. We never even learn his name, so he walks away. And now it's custom. We read on in verse 7. In former times in Israel, concerning redeeming and exchanging, to confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a manner of attesting to Israel. So after he says, I cannot redeem it, then he draws off the sandal. And thankfully, the narrator gives us what this means. This is a visible surrender of rights. He's stepping off of the land and his right to the land symbolically. It's basically a legally binding action, very similar to what a signature is. And then the Redeemer says to Boaz, who is no longer the Redeemer, buy it for yourself. And he drew off his sandal. So then Boaz says to the elders, all right, you've seen it. You understand what's going on. You are my witnesses this day. I bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon, or Machlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. So calling them witnesses, making sure that it is a very clear, actual, legally binding arrangement. Everything is done in the light at the gate in front of 10 elders. A very, drawing off the sandal is the same as signing a document. And the word wife, he finally says here, you are my witnesses that Ruth the Moabite, I have bought to be my wife. And now he's making explicit something that, hey, I am going to have Ruth as my wife. Ruth moves from vulnerable widow to protected wife. Redemption restores dignity here. It's a very beautiful thing. And then also interesting too, that Boaz particularly brings up Naomi first and then Ruth, following the cultural standard of saying, listen, Naomi is who this is for, but who's going to benefit from it is Ruth. She's part of the inheritance that Naomi, who's the primary person, it's for. So following the cultural standards, not just rushing into marriage, not just rushing into it, but keeping everything where it should be. And then finally, in verses 11 and 12, we read, then all the people were gathered at the gate. The elders said, we are witnesses, making it really clear that this is actually a legally binding agreement. And then the elders say, may the Lord make this woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. They're giving them a blessing of fertility and greatness because Rachel and Leah are the people, the women, that built up the house of Israel originally. And so what we see here is a pretty cool full arc of redemption. And it gets even better, which is hard to believe. So what we see here is that the elders are praying that Boaz will have a lasting name. Here's the quiet thunder of the passage. The fact that the man who refuses redemption is forgotten. The man who embraces redemption is the one who's remembered and is able to pass on his legacy. And through this faithful, ordinary, obedient act of Boaz, God is preparing a line that leads to David and ultimately to Jesus in a really, really cool way. And redemption here, we learn, costs something. But refusing redemption costs everything. So don't be like that unnamed man that misses the redemption story in his own life. Follow Jesus, love Jesus, and allow him to redeem your story. Amen.